All right. Um, Hello, this is my draft proposal for Big Brother 28. Um, as you can see, we're on a Survivor draft here, which isn't Big Brother. You might be confused, but here's here's why I'm creating my own draft system. I think the Fantasy Survivor draft that we do every season is good. It's a good system for the game of Survivor. I think the vote points are good, and predicting who wins is good because being a viewer of Survivor means reading the edit. At least being an analytical viewer of Survivor means trying to read the edit. However, I think the way that they draft players, like the actual draft, when you draft two survivors on your team, it's pretty horseshit. Tiffany is the leading survivor points. Tiffany's the leader in survivor points. Um, Followed by Jonathan, Joe, Aubrey, and Rizzo. So the entire final five is in the top five. But then you have to go all the way past Coach, Genevieve, Chrissy D, Rick, Ozzy, Stephanie, Colby, and Camilla to get to Suri, which is ridiculous. Suri should not have 21 points while Tiffany has 43. It's stupid. It doesn't reward good gameplay. Not saying that Tiffany played the game poorly, I'm just saying Suri is under people who played the game much, much worse than she did. Let's be honest, Suri was the best player in the season, and she is like ranked like 16th or 15th on the cast in terms of how many points they award you for having her on your team. And I don't want that to be the case with the draft. I want to reward good play. I want to reward social play. I want you to earn points from drafting someone who just, isn't. I want you to be able to earn points from someone who isn't necessarily good at competitions but is good at other aspects of the game. So, with that in mind, here's my proposed system. Um, this should go like below. I'm going to talk about this after. +2 for winning HOH. My reasoning for +2 for HOH is lead decision maker in a given week. Obviously, this isn't always the case. Most of the time, the HOH's nominations are them, their idea. Of course, influenced by alliances and people and whatnot. That's how a social game works. But I'm rewarding an HOH over veto holder because the HOH actually determines who the nominees are for a week, and the POV only changes them and has a limited amount of change. I also decided to give a +1 for being picked by house guest choice. So if a nominee or HOH draws house guest choice and then they pick someone, the person who is picked by the house guest choice will earn a point. And the idea behind that is rewarding social game. Simple. Obviously, it's not a foolproof method. Like sometimes you get picked for house guest choice. First of all, it's luck. If your ally gets house guest choice, that's lucky. And also, like, there might be some random reason you get chosen besides you having a good social game. But nonetheless, it is one of the only ways I can quantify before a season starts rewarding someone who's good at the social game. It's a way to reward someone who isn't on the block, and there's not many ways to reward someone who isn't on the block but isn't winning a competition. I give +1 for Blockbuster. I'm valuing Blockbuster the same as Veto because that shit is intense. The Blockbuster's a live competition. Of course, the playing field is halved compared to a Veto, but everyone's excited when the Blockbuster happens. It's probably the best twist to come out of Big Brother in the last 15 years. So I decided that I didn't want to make it less than the veto. Same for special powers and twists. There's not going to be that many of them in a season. Of course, they're going to do some fuckassery, whatever. It's +1. It happens. I am giving half a point for surviving a week without being nominated or winning a competition, excluding weeks where you win a veto while you're off the block. This is also known as a normie week. So the idea behind this is, again, reward social game. If someone, like, say for instance, Ashley Hollis, survives the majority of the game without being in danger, but isn't winning a lot of competitions in a normal draft format, she won't get a lot of points because she won 2 competitions the entire season. Um, in this format, she's rewarded for being off the block for 10 weeks, you know? Someone like Derek Levasseur is awarded for, never being nominated. Um, and I also, the clause of like, if you're off the block and you win veto, you still get the 0.5 is, it makes sense. Like the only, it's to, again, it's to, the point of the rule is to reward social game. And because the winner of the veto wasn't on the block when they won the veto, I still think that they should be rewarded for not being nominated by the HOH. Now, they could have been a backdoor target, but I can't control for that, and that's not something I'm gonna like write in like, oh, if you're a backdoor target, then it doesn't count. Like, no, like whatever. It's 0.5 points. I have -1 for being nominated pre-Final Four. This is to prevent people like Keanu from, having a shit ton of points for winning a lot of competitions because he went on the block. Like Kelly and Keanu would have so many more points under this system if I got rid of this rule, because they only have the chances to win as many competitions as they do because they're going on the block so much. So they're winning vetoes and they're winning blockbusters, and their social game is poor, and they're, shit at the game of Big Brother, and they're never winning, but they get a lot of points. I don't fuck with that. I think their points should be balanced a little bit, and that's why I'm subtracting points for being nominated, because if you're nominated, you're not as good at the game. Like, just straight up. Punish bad social game. +2 for being vetoed by someone else. Again, it's to reward social game. And I think this is a rule that I see in other drafts as well. I'm not sure, where like you get rewarded for being vetoed. But this is different than like, I'm not rewarding anyone for winning the veto and taking themselves off the block. This is only for if you lost the veto as a nominee and someone else vetoes you, like how, when did it happen? It happened, oh yeah, Vince was on the block, week 6 when Rachel won HOH, and then Lauren won the veto and used it on Vince. So that rewards Vince for having the social game to have Lauren use the veto on him. That's the point. +5 for making the jury. I want the player, if you draft a player that has longevity, even if they get like 9th or 8th or 7th, they're still going to get a flat bonus for making the jury because they made it halfway through the game, and they had a good enough game to make it that far. They'll be punished or rewarded for other things here as well. +8 for coming in 3rd, and +10 for making the final 2. The prior bonuses don't count, just means that if you come in 3rd, you don't get this +5. So really this is +5 for being evicted in the jury phase, and then it's a +8 for being evicted in 3rd place, and then a +10 for making the final 2. So I don't have to have this if I just do this. I talked a little bit about this with Alex. Essentially, my idea here is rewarding players that are good TV, which is subjective, it's biased, and I don't care. Of course, we can just get rid of this altogether if we don't want it, if everyone else hates it. But I personally would like to reward someone for scrambling, doing a lot of active work in the house, even if it's not being shown in the episodes, or for getting into fights and drama and just being good TV. I want to punish people that are boring and got cast on the show and took up a casting spot. Someone like Lauren or Adrian, Riley, Catherine. I'd want to punish those people because, like, fuck you guys for taking my spot on the cast. It's really not a personal thing. It is literally just like, I think that it adds a wrinkle of strategy towards our drafting system if we're drafting in mind people that we think will be active players, will be bombastic, will bring good TV to the season. There's also a minus, so there's a +3 for the 3 most entertaining house guests per week, and a -1 for most boring house guests per week. I'm open to changing these. I'm open to changing everything, of course, but these I think I'm open to workshopping, because this is a lot of points. You can rack up a lot of points if you're very entertaining, and I'll show some examples. Of course, I've run these numbers on Big Brother 27, and I ran these numbers on separate individuals as well because I just wanted to see how it would apply to their games. But yeah, there's +3 for being one of the top 3 most entertaining house guests per week, -1 for being one of the top 3 most boring house guests in a week, and then +1 for one of the 3 funniest confessionals. This one's harder. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to, when I was initially doing my format, I had to tweak so many things, and one of the things that was happening is that people didn't have a lot of points. Like, some people were like really, really low or in the negatives, and I wanted a way to like get more points. So like I added the house guest choice thing. I added this 0.5 for surviving a week, and I added additional points for funny confessionals, because you can be kind of a boring player in the house, like Johnny Mac or Brittany Haynes on bb12, for instance, but have really, really good confessionals, and maybe you should be awarded for being a good confessionalist. I don't know what you guys would think about that. I personally like it, that's why I wrote it, but I'd be so down to just get rid of it because it's not going to affect that much anyway. You might notice there's no bonus for winning. The bonus for winning is that you get a 1.25 multiplier to your whole draft. So if you draft the winner, the idea behind this is that the winner of the season might not get a lot of points. You know, someone like Ashley Hollis, even with the format control, like not rewarding comp beasts that heavily, it still has to reward people who win competitions. So Ashley Hollis does not have as many points as Vince Pinero or Morgan, and she's barely above like people like Keanu. So I decided to write in a multiplier so that if you draft the winner, it multiplies the rest of your entire draft. And we'll look at how that affects things when I get to my examples below this. I also put up a 1.1 times multiplier to drafting the runner-up. So essentially it's a 25% boost and a 10% boost, which I think is fair. If you identify someone you think is a good winner pick and you draft them and they win the season, I think that you should be rewarded for that. So yeah, this is like any random week. You can get 2 points for winning HOH, 1 point for winning POV. You could get 3 if you win both. You could get 0.5 for voting, or like being off the block. -1 for nominated, 1 for nominated but someone took you off with a veto, 0 if you get nominated but you win your way off. Breaking even here I think makes sense. You played poorly but you won a competition, congratulations. There's no minus for being evicted, it's just -1 now. Sorry, I changed that. +3 for entertaining and -1 for boring. This is what it could look like any random week in terms of the points you might get and the points you might lose. In terms of determining entertainment value, if you guys want to roll with this idea, there's a couple different ways we could do it. We could do it with ranked choice voting. Like, you submit like your top 3 most entertaining house guests and your bottom 3 based on order, and then whoever, you know, has the most accumulative points is determined to be the most entertaining, and then second and third, and then vice versa with the most boring. The con to this, I think it's a really good method mathematically. The con is that we would have to play with the honor system. We couldn't have, it could be affected by draft bias, you know, people putting people that are on their draft higher because they want their draft to do well. It would be like a pretty scummy thing to do, but like you might do it subconsciously. I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm too infallible that it couldn't happen to me. So certainly that is something to consider. We could also just do determined by consensus, but we'd need everybody to like discuss. But if like we all talked and we decided these are the people that are most entertaining, these are people the least, then we distribute points that way. We could do that. It would just have to be, you know, collaborative, and like everyone would need to contribute to this discussion, I guess. Or at least that would be the best, you know, if everyone could contribute. Oh, and for the entertainment thing, it's top 3 and bottom 3, but it shifts to top 2 and bottom 2 at the halfway point, which is the final 9, and then it shifts to top 1 and bottom 1 at final 5. So like at final 9, we're not going to have 3 people get +3 points and 3 people get -1 point, because usually the season gets more stale as it goes on when there's less people, so I'm only rewarding, it's proportional essentially. Here is my personal, I didn't think too hard about this. I just tried to remember weeks, and I did like, here are my three most entertaining of the week. Here are my three least entertaining of the week for Big Brother 27, so that I could run the numbers for like the entire cast. Um, you'll see a lot of Adrian. Adrian only lasted 3 weeks. He's here all 3 weeks because he was a bust. There's like 5 instances of Lauren because she was Lauren. There's a bunch of Kelly because besides volunteering for the block, she was like actually a dud. There is some Ava because she became a dud for no reason. There's some Will because a lot of time he was chilling and not doing anything. There's Catherine. There's Riley. This is my opinions, of course. So this is like without any collaboration from anybody else. And then like on the positive side, you have a lot of Rachel, a lot of Morgan, some Vince, some Ashley, some Keanu. Um, yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it. So using the system, I crunched the numbers for every single house guest in Big Brother 27. Um, I wanted to do it because it was the most recent season, so it's the one I remember the best, and it's the one probably everyone else remembers the best. Um, the non-bolded numbers are numbers without the entertainment points. So Ashley's at 16.5, Vince is at 21, Morgan's at 14, Ava's at 10, Keanu 7, Lauren 12. You can look at all of that. And then the bolded numbers are numbers with entertainment points. I prefer these numbers. It rewards people like Ashley for having good weeks despite not winning a lot of competitions. It rewards people like Morgan for the same and for just giving us cracked feeds because I don't know, if I drafted Morgan and then like I didn't get that many points from it, wait, is this right? There's no way this is right. She won like 7 competitions. Whatever. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You get my point. Um, I wanted to reward someone who is like gave us amazing feeds. Someone like Rachel. Actually, Rachel is the biggest benefactor. Not actually Morgan is the biggest benefactor, but Rachel is a really big benefactor because despite getting ninth, she has the 4th most points. Because despite her only winning one competition, she gets a lot of points for never going on the block, and then she should get points for fucking being a bomb ass bitch, in my opinion. And then it also helps, pre-jurors. Like there's a lot of pre-jurors in the negatives here, which I think is fair. A lot of these people were flops, like Catherine and Riley, Adrian, Amy, Zay. They were flops. But then there's the pre-jurors that I don't think were flops that are in the positives, like Mickey, Zach, and Jimmy. At least they had their moments of not being flops. Anyways, so let's see how this translates towards teams. I tried to make some balanced teams so I could see how the points would shake out. And I was essentially asking questions of my format with the way that I created the teams. So the team 1 is Ashley, Lauren, and Catherine, and it's asking, does a winner carry mediocre picks, even if those mediocre picks have longevity? So Catherine made it almost halfway through the season. Lauren made it to what I consider the end game, the final 6, and Ashley won. But this draft, I would say, is top-heavy. Ashley, I think, is really the only good character and player in this draft. I think Lauren and Catherine are extremely mediocre. So I wanted to see how much Ashley's multiplier carries this team of pretty mid picks. And then I had Vince, Kelly, and Zach, 2nd place, 7th place, 13th, I think. And it asks, does a runner with more comp wins than the winner, Vince has more base points than Ashley does due to the format, does a runner with more comp wins than a winner carry mediocre picks? I would say that Kelly and Zach are even more mediocre than Lauren and Catherine, but I wanted to see how much Vince carries it with both having more base points due to having more competition wins and coming in second, he gets this multiplier. And then I made Morgan, Riley, and Amy. I put Morgan with the 2 people, I think, with the worst scores. They both had they were both in the negatives. I wanted to see, does the biggest compies carry 2 flops? I did want this team to do the worst because I wanted to make sure that the draft format didn't reward someone who just won their way to the end, because I don't think that's super fair. And then there's a team of Ava, Rachel, and Will, which I think is by far the most balanced, and I wanted to see how the most balanced team fares. And you can see here the point totals and then the multipliers. So Ashley, Lauren, and Catherine's base points are 31. Vince, Kelly's, and Zach's are 35. Morgan, Riley, and Amy is 25, and Ava, Rachel, and Will is 31.5. Um, that might not be right. Because I was changing a lot of things. Like I was tweaking so many things, but I think it's right. If it's not, it should still be similar. Um, and then I applied the multipliers. Whoa. I applied the multipliers to Ashley and Vince for coming in first and second, and what it comes out to is if you drafted this team compared to all the other teams, you would win by 0.25 points. Barely over Vince, Kelly, and Zach's teams. Morgan, Riley, and Amy's team is not in the running at all. And then Ava, Rachel, and Will, they're ahead of this Ashley team, and they're only 3.5 behind this Vince team, but because they have no multiplier, they are stuck in the mud. So the multiplier does punish a team that's like balanced but doesn't have like, one of the final two, which is really hard to draft. However, Will is kind of holding this team back because he's boring, so he doesn't have a lot of points. If he was like a better player, then he would have more points. He only has 2.5. If you put Ava, Rachel, and Keanu on this team, or Ava, Rachel, and Lauren, then they win, I think. And they're close enough that I think it's still pretty balanced, especially considering if we do vote points, it will help make sure that the drafting isn't the only way you earn points. So yeah, I was pretty happy with this result, to be honest. And then I ran more tests. I did an Ashley, Keanu, and Rachel team versus a Vince, Morgan, and Amy team. So this team has the winner, but this team has the two highest scorers, but it also has the lowest scorer, and this team has like the most iconic player of the season. And so base-wise, this team mogs this team by 4.5 points, but with the multiplier, this team wins, which I think a team of Ashley, Keanu, and Rachel should be a team of Vince, Morgan, and Amy. Although Vince and Morgan are really good characters and, played interesting and fulfilling games, so the score should be close, and that's exactly what I got. I was very satisfied with this. And then I tested Ashley, Vince, and Amy, so if you have the top two, and then Morgan, Rachel, and Keanu. Oh, okay, so I explained this wrong. I wanted to give the multiplier to the drafted team that has the second highest placing player. So, like, if you draft Ashley and Vince, you get the winner multiplier, but if another team has Morgan, they still get the 1.1 because Vince is on this team, so Morgan's the next highest placed player. That was the idea behind that multiplier. It wasn't for drafting the runner-up necessarily. It was for drafting the next highest placed player. Although if you want to do runner-up, we could do that. It would just... Here's the reason why. Is like take Ashley, Vince, and Amy, a very top-heavy team dragged down by the worst player of the season, and then you have Morgan, Rachel, and Keanu, a very balanced team, very similar to the Ashley, Keanu, Rachel team. Base-wise, this team mogs by 6.5 points, but with the multiplier, this team barely wins. And I think that is very fair. If you draft the final two, then, maybe your draft should win despite, you having a dud. But it should be really close if you draft three really, really significant, important characters and players with longevity on the season. And so this result being really close was satisfying to me. If we did it just the 1.0 multiplier, like if we did it runner-up and like if you draft Morgan, you don't get a multiplier in this scenario, it would be 59, which is fine. It's still close. It's not as close, but I think it's marginal enough that it doesn't matter. It would all be affected by vote points anyways. So, there's that. Now to get to vote points. So you can see this is the group of vote point getters in the Survivor draft last season that, like, these were, like, the most active people. Like, there's a big fall-off after this. The vote points get to, like, 30 and 20, and it's basically, I would assume it's people that, like, kind of gave up and stopped doing vote points or, like, missed a lot of weeks. These are people that, like, did vote points every week and were clearly trying and, like, actively watching the edit. It ranges from 59 to 85, so it's a decent range, but it's not that big. It averages out to between 4.5 to 6.5 vote points per episode. 85 was giving you 6.5 per out of 10, and then 59 was giving you 5.5 or 4.5 out of 10. And I wanted to scale this down a little bit because, obviously if we have these numbers, then it would completely override these. Like if you're getting 60 points for a really good draft and like 40 points for an average draft and like 25 for a mediocre draft, then the vote points are clearly the only thing that matters if we use, the survivor scale. So the concept I came up with is a hit list, where you submit an ordered list of 3 people that you believe are most likely going to be evicted before the week starts, before an HOH is won. If your number 1 pick is evicted, you get 3 points. If your number 2 pick on your list is evicted, you get 2 points. And if your number 3 pick on your list is evicted, you get 1 point. And then the list becomes, instead of 3 people, it becomes 2 people at the midway point. The reason I think this good is because it still rewards skill and like knowing who might be evicted and who's in trouble going into a week. But it doesn't reward you that much in terms of the actual point value you're getting. The maximum amount of points you could get is 32, assuming 12 rounds of gameplay, and getting the max amount of points is essentially impossible. It's much likelier that the highest vote point earner will get around 20, because 20 is 65% of 32, and Eli, who got 85 points, was the highest vote point getter, and that was 65% of the max amount of points in the Survivor draft, which is 130. So my assumption is that the average person that is paying attention to the season will get between 10 and 20 vote points, which is clearly enough to influence a close race of a draft, but it is not enough to be the thing that technically wins or loses you the draft as a whole. And that's kind of what I was going for. So yeah, that's essentially the entire draft format that I'm pitching. I have some examples of how this applies to players in different seasons as well. I took some players from season 26. So Angela Murray gets 21 points. She gets 2 HOHs, a veto, -7 for being nominated 7 times. She only is normal in 1 week, so 0.5, but she gets +6 for being vetoed 3 times. Impressive. It would typically be very impressive to be vetoed 3 times in a season, so 6 points would be phenomenal. However, the way Angela did it was, crazy, because Tucker vetoed her, even though Tucker was on the block. So, she gets lucky, but also, like, Leah takes her off the block because Leah wanted to keep her around, and that's social game, so I think she should be rewarded for that. She gets +5 for making jury, and then +12 for 4 weeks of being one of the most entertaining. That might honestly be a low amount of weeks, but there's some weeks where she like falls into the background and doesn't do anything, so I think that's fair. And that leaves her with 21 points. You'll see, compared to someone like Cam, for instance, this is a lot. However, I would not personally be mad at if I drafted Angela, or if anyone drafted Angela, them getting a decent amount of points for drafting Angela because, well, you drafted one of the biggest and best characters in Big Brother history. Like, I can't be mad at you for getting points for that, in my opinion. Of course, over half her points are entertainment points, so we could scrap it, and then she could end up with 9, which I still think is fair. I just think it's kind of lame. Chelsea ends up with 27 points. Competitions, safe a lot of weeks, only nominated once, made the final 2, was entertaining sometimes, and rarely the most boring person in the house, because there's some duds in that house. So based on my personal bias and subjective opinion, she ends up with 27 points, but also the 1.25 multiplier for the rest of her team. Mackenzie ends up with 26.5. Of course, she's not getting as many points for being entertaining. She's getting more minuses for being nominated, but she gets a lot of points for winning competitions. And I can't prevent that. Like, do I think that Mackenzie and Chelsea are on the same level of player, and that, like, if you draft them, you should get the same amount of points? Not necessarily, but also Mackenzie broke the competition record. Like, she won 10 competitions. Or she tied the competition record, which is insane. So, like, if you get a lot of points for tying the competition record, so would be it. You were a significant outlier in Big Brother history. It's not going to happen 99% of the time. And then she gets the plus 1.1 multiplier anyways. So, like, if you have Chelsea, you're still getting more bang for your buck than Mackenzie, even if you think that, like, she was, like, boring more, or if she was not entertaining at all. Like, you still get this multiplier, and that's more valuable than those points anyways. And then Cam, he comes out to a flat 0, And I think this is personally fair. This might be crazy. You might look at this and be like, Cam got third place. How does he have 0 points? This is crazy. Number one, he only wins one competition. I reward him for having a good social game, staying off the block for 10 weeks. He gets +5 for that, so he's at +6. He gets +8 for coming in third, which is 14 points. -2 for being nominated twice, so he's at 12. So if you take away the entertainment thing, he's at 12 points. However, he floated all the way to third place. He wasn't playing an active game at all. He was essentially a GOAT. He was like Victoria Raffaele, but just like a little bit better and like less of a ditz. He was a slightly more aware Victoria. You know, he was a GOAT that was dragged and cut at third because Mackenzie is stupid. So I think it's fair that he ends up with 0 points. He's a 0 point caliber player. He's like a neutral player. He's not a good player. And he didn't bring much to the show when he was on it for someone who was on it for so long, which didn't help the end game of bb28. So I was mad at Cam getting 0. Maybe he should get a little bit more. Oh, wait, I think I did this calculation before I changed it. There's no way it's -12 because I did -1 for least entertaining. I used to have it -3, and then I decided that was insane. Okay, so I think Cam would have had a -4. So actually Cam would end up with 8 points. I think that's reasonable, personally. And then I did it for Dan Giesling in Season 10. He gets 3 HOHs, 2 vetoes, America's Player, a decent amount of weeks where he's just chilling. -2 for being nominated, but then +2 for being vetoed once, and then 10 for making the final 2, and then 12 for being one of the most entertaining 4 weeks. Dan Giesling, considered the best player of all time, and this is one of the most entertaining winning seasons of all time, ends up with 34. I think that's pretty fair. This is like the highest point total I think you could even possibly get as a base, and then he gets the multiplier as well. If you draft someone who's a Dan Giesling caliber player, I think you should probably win the draft. Like, you know, those are once in a lifetime players. And then Derek Levasseur ends up with 23. I didn't actually calculate like who is the top 3 most entertaining and top 3 least entertaining for bb16. I didn't feel like it, but I would imagine Derek isn't affected too much by this. He was never the most boring person in that house because there are some duds on that season, but he's also, you know, the reason that season is so boring in the first place because he's just dominating the entire time. So there's no way that he's going to get that many points for being entertaining. Like maybe when they decide not to flip with Hayden and Nicole, but like, should he get points for deciding not to flip? Probably not, you know? So he just gets points for being HOH and for being safe hella and making the final 2. And I think that's fine. So yeah, that's my proposal. Let me know what you think of it. If you think there's anything should be changed dramatically. But I personally really like how it turned out and how it affected the players that have already played. So yeah.